Introducing Zach Davis and Josh Anderson with the Sound Money Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Sound Money, Sound Principles, the Believers Podcast. My name's Josh Anderson. I'm here with Zach Davis. How are you, Zach?
Hey, Josh. How's it going? How's it going, everybody?
It's awesome. And what a great last few days we've had in our business lives. It's been a lot of fun. And today to me is a really special day. Very rarely in the world do you get an opportunity to sit down and interview not only one of your business partners, but somebody that's been, for you and I, a tremendous mentor in business. A mentor for the last 17 years for me and you as well. It's just unique opportunities. This individual, not only is he one of the major pioneers of business in the Western region of the United States and around the world, but he's a dear friend. And so we want to welcome today Roger Ball. Glad to have you with us today, Roger. How are you?
I'm really good today. Doggone it, it's snowing in Idaho again.
That's the problem. It's spring in Idaho, but it's snowing. That's the story of our life.
Yeah.
And Roger, what we have here today, we have a lot of listeners on the podcast who know us, who know you, right, from our business dealings in a company called 7K Metals. That's where you're sitting today, is the headquarters of 7K Metals.
That's right.
A business in which the three of us are involved as partners there. But a lot of the listeners don't know anything about you in that regard, right? They're just people that are coming here wanting to know some really sound business principles, right? What it is that makes entrepreneurs tick. And so today is a continuation of an episode we ran before around what are some of the genesis of entrepreneurs' beginnings in business, boy, I don't know that I've ever met a man who has started more businesses and been willing to take on the biggest challenges in the world than you, Roger. And so maybe I'd just like to start today by asking you, maybe you want to share with the listeners a little bit about maybe your first business, some of your first business principles and businesses you started and what you learned, some of the challenges you ran into, maybe where they've grown or where they went away. And maybe we just start there for a minute.
Josh, you warned me that I was going to be doing this, and both you and Zach are aware that I'm not what I consider a public speaker. I don't ever prepare. What you see is what you get, and you asked that question, and I've thought about that, and I've thought a question that was asked me numbers of years ago when Governor Kempthorne was the governor of the state of Idaho. He chose 20 people in the state of Idaho to work on a project that he was instituting. And his question was, are entrepreneurs made or are they born? And we spent a whole year. There was 20 of us in the state of Idaho that was given that challenge and that question. And I've thought about that a lot since that time. In 7K, we are trying to make entrepreneurs. We are trying to make independent people who go out and do independent things, that do things and are driven to do things. And as I contemplated this interview and this program this morning, I thought, what did I come out with when we did this program? And I think different of those 20 people, they probably came out with different thoughts and different results based on the interaction with all 20 of us. But one of the main things that I came out with is that that's a combination. You can help an entrepreneur become an entrepreneur. But entrepreneurship, in a lot of respects, is born. Because an entrepreneur, we all come here on this earth with our challenges. We come here with thoughts, feelings. Each one of us are individual. And based on that, I've said, well, what things does an entrepreneur have that he brings with him? Is he born? Okay. I think there's a lot of people in the world that are born to be entrepreneurs. But the fact is they can't be an entrepreneur because they're born with other things. A conflicting concept or a conflicting thing in their spirit and their individualism. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I used to, and not so much now, but I used to be asked to speak at different venues. I would go to colleges, universities, and mainly in the business department, and they would ask me to come and give a lecture on entrepreneurship. It was very interesting. I would go into one of those classes, and there would be, 30, 40 students in there. And my first question is, how many of you want to be a business owner? How many of them raised their hand? Well, you've probably done that. Almost every one of them. Yeah, that's me, and then I'd say, well, are you an entrepreneur? And almost everyone would say, yeah, that's me, and they're going through and learning all these things. And I would say, do you have any idea what it is to be an entrepreneur? And they would all get kind of quiet, and I would say, this feeling that you have of being a business owner and being an entrepreneur is taught in these courses that you're taking in these colleges, okay? These colleges are trying, and your professor here is trying to encourage you to be an entrepreneur. And I said, there's one thing that's going to keep you from being an entrepreneur. And I would ask them, and sometimes some of them would come up with the right answer, some of them wouldn't. But you know what that is? It's fear. Fear will take a natural-born entrepreneur and destroy him. It will take those natural tendencies to be an entrepreneur, and it will destroy those tendencies. Because an entrepreneur who is actually an entrepreneur has to get rid of fear. Fear keeps 90, I don't know how many percent of the world from being entrepreneurs, being ownerships of businesses, doing those things. Fear is a terrible thing. And the interesting thing is, fear usually comes with us. It's not taught. It can be taught. It can be experienced in your early growing up years and that, but it's part of us too. And that fear overshadows and eliminates this natural ability to be an entrepreneur, okay? And so I would look at this class and I would say, how many of you fear? If you want to go to work now and work on your fear, because fear will keep most of you from really being a true entrepreneur and or a business owner. I says, one day you're going to be married and that wife of yours may be fearful. She may have a lot of influence on you. You're going to fight a tremendous battle in this world to be an entrepreneur. People fear entrepreneurship. They do. They fear it. You go in the bank, you borrow money, they give you all this money and they pat you on the back. What do they do the next day? They all get afraid. I just borrowed this guy 3, 4, 5, whatever millions of dollars. I wonder if he'll pay it back. I wonder if his idea is good enough, And so all these people then become fearful. They become fearful. And I know you've experienced this time after time in your life, as I have. I don't know an entrepreneur that does not face this problem of fear in the world, not even their own fear, the fear of everybody in your universe, everybody that you touch, feels, has fear. And that fear will literally try to strip that entrepreneurship away from you. The people in this podcast today, don't succumb to that fear. Because if you do, you will never be an entrepreneur.
I'm glad you say it that way, Roger, because I think we're sent here to this earth, and one of our things that we're supposed to, I believe, overcome is fear. Fear, I believe, can be overcome, but it's overcome with knowledge. Knowledge turns into power. It's overcome with experience. When we try something for the first time, I always think about, I got these bad friends. Zach's one of them. That yeah. Sometimes, we might.
I got a couple of them.
Yeah, bad friends that, Zach and I might go do something that some people would call adventurous, right? Might go for a motorcycle ride, and there might be a big cliff that we got to jump up or jump down. Fear makes all the butterflies come in and tells you can't do it, and puts in your mind, if I do it, I'm going to fail, I'm going to crash, I'm going to get hurt and maybe break some bones. But in the very instance that we try it, one of two things happens. One, we might crash and break a bone and get hurt, but the fear goes away, right? Or we do it and we accomplish it and the fear goes away. So I've just come to realize that we're sent here to earth to overcome fear. And through experience and knowledge and power, we overcome fear. And that's the life of an entrepreneur. So Zach, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. In fact, we had an experience years ago. So for Josh's wife, his 40th birthday, she wanted to go skydiving.
Don't tell people. Why would you tell people about this fear?
And
Why
so
would you do that?
And so we booked it and we took our wives and we went skydiving. But here's what was so interesting is as you're getting ready, you're getting the jumpsuit on and the helmet and the glasses and they're, prepping you and you have to jump with somebody first, right? You have to be tethered to them, which I think is an interesting principle in and of itself. But when you fly up, you go up to about 12,000 feet, right? And then they have this, light in the cabin or the cockpit of the plane that goes from red to green when you hit elevation, and they know now that it's safe to jump. They open the door and the wind's just like whoosh, whoosh, going by, and you look out that door at 12,000 feet a ways. It's quite a ways, but here's what's so interesting. Like you have all the butterflies and all this anticipation of what could happen, right? When you get to the threshold of that airplane door. And then once you leave that threshold and you jump, it is crazy because all the fear that you had right there at that moment of jumping off, it's pretty immense, it's like all these scenarios in your mind, I could be this grease ball on the ground at 12,000 feet here in a minute.
Yeah.
But as soon as you jump, it's like the most freeing feeling in the world and all the fear is gone. Because now it's like, what are you going to do? Right? There's nothing you can do about the situation now. And so I think entrepreneurship is a little bit like that, where in the moments before the doing, you have all this buildup of fear and anticipation, which is usually what stops people from getting to the threshold of the door. But then once you launch the business and once you start, then it's like, okay, this is okay, right? And you have that feeling of like, we can move this forward. And then you kind of face that over and over again throughout the business as different challenges come up. But man, managing that fear for sure is a big, big thing.
It's a big thing. I interrupted there, Josh.
Go ahead, Rob.
Again, I have a saying, and it's absolutely true, and you both alluded to this, and that is, our knowledge will save us. Our knowledge can save us. Don't ever quit learning, because the more knowledge you have, the less you deal with fear. And I agree with that 100%. Maybe that's one of the advantages of getting old like myself, okay? And yet I lack so much knowledge. But your knowledge will save you. You cannot accomplish where you have not been, where you have not seen, or what you have not read about. You cannot go there. You can dream, but even those dreams come from one of those three things. And so don't hesitate, go there, dream about it, read about it, because that's where those thoughts, those dreams, those things come into your life. But to go back again with this thing with Kempthorne, and one of the questions you've asked me prior to this podcast was, how does this grow in your life, And I'll give you one example. My father was a bit of an entrepreneur. We raised sheep, we raised hay, grain, and all those kind of things. He had a logging business. From the time I was 14 to 18, he was over all of the agricultural offices in the state of Idaho. He was one of the founders of the Farm Bureau. The dike that is, saving, not anymore, but it used to. He and a green fellow went to Washington and got that dike built from up to Rivey, clear down to the deer parks, So an entrepreneur is motivated. My dad had a saying that said, anything that goes uphill must be pushed. That is on the back of his gravestone. That was his life's most important statement that he tried to teach people. Anything that is hard must be pushed. You don't coast down a steep hill. You're hunters, you know what it takes to get to the top of that mountain, okay? And it is work, it is effort, and if you don't push, you will not get there. You will never see the other side of the mountain, okay? This is what my dad used to do. I'll give you an example. And I hear this in my words, in my mouth, in my ears, in almost every day of my life. I'll give you an example. My dad was a county agent in down around the Boise area in American Falls. We used to buy sheep, and there was this old sheep herder that was just east of Boise, southeast of Boise, in those kinds of big dry hills up there. Mm-hmm. He was a man who didn't have a family, raised thousands of sheep. My dad became a very good friend of his, and as he got older, he offered my dad this ranch that he had, with some caveats, of course, you know. And every time we'd go to Boise, Dad would say, "See that mountain over there?" And he'd relate this story to me. This old man, he gave me an opportunity what would have blessed my life. And he'd say, "Roger, I didn't do it." And then he'd look at me and say, "Don't ever let that happen to you. Don't ever let that happen to you." I still will hear those words. Don't ever let that happen to you. Even today, as old as I am, I hear an opportunity. And I hear these words. Don't ever let that happen to you. Did that affect my life? Did that help me become an entrepreneur? Absolutely. Okay? And that's the way I was raised, literally. Well, I could tell you some stories about fear, okay? Maybe sometime I'll be able to do that. But that being said, okay, you can be born an entrepreneur and you can be trained to be an entrepreneur. My dad trained me to be an entrepreneur. We all come from, basically, most of us in this area, from some kind of farming background. Farmers are entrepreneurs without any question. They gamble. An entrepreneur must be able to gamble. You cannot be an entrepreneur and not gamble. The biggest gamblers in this world are farmers, ranchers. They plant a seed. They have no idea whether that seed will grow, whether it will rain, whether it'll get water, what the price will be when you end up selling it, and all the process. They gamble everything. Well, I was raised a rancher, a farmer, okay? In that then, those seeds of entrepreneurship were born within me, okay? And my dad used to say something else, and I don't often bring this up because to me, it's a little private. Not only is it private, but it can hurt people's feelings, okay? You're in a group of people. And if I told that group of people what my dad taught me, Roger, own your own business. Don't work for somebody else. Is that not taught? Were you two not taught that?
I was taught that by my grandfather.
I was taught that by my dad.
And I knew your grandpa, and he believed that if there was ever an entrepreneur, it was Tom Mitchell. He worked for himself. He had every faith, every ability, did it spook Tom to do something like that? Heaven knows, I got enough business with Tom. Well, it was a risk here when you did that, okay? Literally. Okay, well, so here you go. You know, entrepreneurs are born because they have natural abilities, and they're either taught in this world or there are things that will discourage them from becoming an entrepreneur. I think one of our biggest jobs, especially in 7K, when we say we're going to bless the lives of people, is to teach them not to have fear, to dream, to believe in themselves. And it's our duty and our responsibility to help them do that. Help them believe in themselves. Because if they have the ability to go out into the world and make a difference, we've got to take the fear away from them. We have to do it.
That, I appreciate you sharing that because that's absolutely true statements. What people just heard is truth. And Zach and I have shared with people in the past, and we get this principle, that entrepreneurs seem to always, good entrepreneurs, a lot of times their business ideas are born out of someone telling them they can't do something. Why that is, I don't know. I don't know if it's stubbornness. I don't know if it's pride. But there is this general consensus that I've noticed throughout life that real entrepreneurs, when they make magnificent changes in the world, often they're born out of someone saying, you can't do that. And you're snickering because I'm thinking of, you've shared with Zach and I in the past and your family, your experience at college. You went and got a meat science degree, a PhD. You were working on a PhD on that. And in that process, there were men that told you that something could not be done. Maybe share with the listeners, if you wouldn't mind, unless it's too personal, but it was impactful. It was impactful for me when I learned about it in the past.
I'll share this with you, and it's not spiritual, it's just physical. So, it's easy to do that. I went to the University of Illinois. I was there on a PhD. I had two professors, Burdett Bridenstine and R.G. Kaufman. When I was there, my PhD project was calibrating the largest scintillation counter in the world. And I won't go into that, okay? But in that process, my mother called me one day. I was actually teaching there at that time. And she said, Roger, there's an opportunity in Idaho Falls, and your dad needs an opportunity. We had just gone through an earthquake in 1959. It literally destroyed our family because my dad had bought a lodge, entrepreneurship, sold logging business. So we go off to Montana. Now I'm hunting and fishing. Put that in your hat, okay? From a kid that always was irrigating spuds and cutting hay and hauling hay and lambing sheep and that. Now I'm hunting, fishing. That was great, okay? But anyway, that being said, so I'm and my mother called me and said this plant was available. Well, in this process, in my summertime as an assistant ship, and that was part of the education, the process, I used to judge a lot of carcass shows in Illinois at the Illinois State Fairs, county fairs. So I'd gone in and out of almost every meatpacking plant in the state of Illinois, big, little, Swift, all of them. And so I said, well, I'll come to Idaho Falls and I'll take a look. Well, I went to Idaho Falls, and here's this old, beat up piece of junk. In fact, it was probably as ugly a meat plant as I'd ever seen. In fact, I'll tell you this story. I went in there, and an old high school friend of mine was the sausage man in that meatpacking plant. When I walked in there, this great big buffalo grinder, and they were grinding meat. Glenn Brockus, who was the inspector, I think Glenn's dead now, so I can say this. I won't offend him. I can't ask him if I can. He was standing at the end of this stuffer, this grinder, and he was picking something out of it. He was picking deer hair out of this meat. Oh. And I said, this is during regular working hours. I mean, I'd just been on a PhD program, okay, talking about sanitation and where meat was in the industry of the world and everything. Here I see this deer meat being put through this grinder, and the inspector picking deer hair out of it. I watched it. It went clear through the process. We made a wiener out of it. We added beef and pork and all the other things. It was called Willie the Wiener. That was the name of the wiener in the plant, okay? Tater meat is there. And I'm saying, you got to be kidding me. How can this happen? In the United States of America, how could this even happen? Okay? Well, so I go back and I take pictures of this plant and I show it in our regular meeting, okay, with Burdett and with Kaufman and two other graduate students. I show them the pictures of this meat plant. And I'll never forget, Burdett Bridenstine looked at that and he says, Roger, this is the worst place I've ever seen. You mean to tell me that after 9 years of schooling, you would even consider going and buying into this meat plant, you and your father. You are crazy. Here you go, Joe. You are crazy, okay? Well, and this is what he said. He said, Roger, if you go there, the rest of your life, you will have the hard term shit under your fingernails and blood to your elbows. The rest of your life. You're going to give up 9 years of your college experience when you could go and get to work for Swift or some of these other big companies and make a difference, okay? And I'll never forget that. Well, we did that thing, okay? We bought that plant. Well, I think about 10 years later, I was in Chicago at a trade show. And Burdett Bridenstine had become the president and CEO of the National Livestock and Meat Board, which is a pretty prestigious position. He was on the third floor in the office in Chicago in a big high-rise building. And I thought, well, I'm going to go say hi to Burdett. So I walked in that office, and here's the secretary, you know, what you would expect, a big picture, you know, National Livestock Meat Board and all this stuff. And I said, is Burdett here? She said, yes, do you have an appointment? And I said, well, I don't. I used to be one of his students. Well, Burdett had a very loud voice. I mean, when he talked, you heard him, really loud. And I could hear his voice in the background. And I'm crazy enough or brazen enough or whatever you like to say, I just turned right around and walked right in his office. He was on the phone. He says, well, wait a minute, I'll call you right back. Somebody just walked in and hung up his phone. And I looked at him and I said, Burdett, I come in here for one reason. I said, do you see any shit under my fingernails? Do you see any blood on my elbow? And I looked him right in the eye, Josh, and I says, I can buy and sell you 10 times, you son of a bitch. I could. Why? Why could I do that? Why did I go buy that old meat plant? It was a start. It was a start. It was a start to own your own dinging business, to be an entrepreneur, to change, and I changed the world. The way beef jerky is made today, I changed it for the world, okay? Because of that decision. Young people need to see a vision. Where do you get that? Some of it comes with you, some of it you learn. There you go. That's the story.
Zach, some thoughts on that?
I think it's a great story. I think I said last time in the last episode we did that the world of academia has no value. You said I was kidding. I said I meant it. But the real value that the world of academia has is it sort of breeds this kind of fire for a lot of people, right? Because, and I really don't mean that. There's a lot of value in the world of academia, but it's so like it's crazy. Here's a guy working on a PhD, Roger, right? And all of these smart people who are supposed to be educating you on how to build a business, be successful, change the world, they don't get it. Like, they're not entrepreneurs, right? Most of the time, professors are not entrepreneurs. And so they don't feel it. They don't understand it. They don't. And so a lot of times your dreams get squashed by people who don't, see it or can't feel it. So, I think one of the biggest things for me too is if you're a dreamer and entrepreneur, you better not share your dreams with people who you don't think are going to support you. Right. And you're going to have to go share them with a banker one day, probably to get some financing, and he'll probably squash it. But man, it's really important to have conversations and surround yourself with people who understand what you're trying to do, because there's enough people in the world that'll try to talk you out of a good idea. And, I would be willing to bet, Roger, I'll be willing to bet, unless you're a vegan or a vegetarian, every single person on this podcast that hears this has probably tasted or been a beneficiary of that decision you made that day. Because if you have eaten jerky in any form today, it's because of the processes that you created that a professor told you couldn't do, that literally changed that whole entire industry. Amazing.
So I tell you another story.
Yeah,
let's hear
our
another one.
listeners, they'd love to hear another
When you get
story.
old, you're an old man. That's all you do is tell stories. When I was going to the University of Moscow, University of Idaho, I was working on a master's degree there, okay? We were down in the meats lab, dissecting meat, and there was Dr. Orm, there was 3 or 4 professors there at that time, okay? And this one professor asked me, he said, Roger, what you going to do when you get out of college? And I said, well, and I really didn't know, And I said, I'm not really sure. And he says, well, what are your goals? And it was interesting because not 2 or 3 days before that, Roger Wright, who was a really good friend of mine and ended up being an attorney here in Idaho Falls, had been discussing this. How much money did we want to make when we got out of school? Well, I had thought a lot about that from that time to that very moment. And right then, a good professor in a college made probably $36,000 a year. That was a top salary, in 1964 or 63 or whenever it was, okay? And I said, well, I and Roger Wright had this conversation just a week ago, and I told him I wanted to make $50,000. And he said, what? You're kidding me. $50,000 a year? And I said, no, $50,000 a month. This guy went ballistic. He went ballistic. He got on me. He said, you young whippersnapper, I was insulting him. He thought I was insulting him because he was only making $36,000 a year and he had a PhD and was teaching college, okay? And I sat there with my head down. He just unloaded on me. We walked out of that meeting, okay, or that when we were dissecting this meat. And Dr. Orm, but his arm around, he was my major professor. I love that man. He's my second father. And this is what he told me. He says, Roger, don't you ever let a man like that take your dreams away. 2 people. One that will steal from you, and one that will put his arms around you and bless your life and support you in your dreams. 2 different things. 2 different things, okay? People will steal. Josh, Jack, you're right. They'll steal from you. You guys know me well.
We do.
Am I capable of making $50,000 a month or a week or even in one stinking damn day?
Yeah,
One second.
We've done it. Yep.
I love that because in my life, right? Women, I think we all have special women in our life. We all have grandmothers, mothers, and wives, and I think women have a unique ability to teach principles. And my grandmother used to tell me that, Josh, there are destroyers in this world and there are dream builders. She would tell me that. My mother she was a dream builder with me. And my wife, I've watched her teach my boys over and over. There are only 2 types of boys in the world and men, destroyers and creators. You're one of the 2. You either create on this planet and you create greatness, or you destroy and you destroy. And in your example, right, there's only 2 types of people. And you were lucky enough in that moment when somebody destroyed and tried to destroy your dream, you were lucky enough to have a creator or a dream builder standing right there too, who said, don't let that happen. And I think I think we as entrepreneurs, especially, we have a divinely appointed destiny to be that for someone else. When we witness those moments in life, when somebody's willing to share a dream with us, we have a divine destiny to build on it and encourage it. And so it's part of who we are. So thanks for sharing that. I actually, the people on the podcast, they don't know, right? They don't know Roger like Zach and I do. And it just made me think about, you just mentioned, Zach, that every person that's ever ate a piece of beef jerky of any kind, they put it in their mouth, and it's because of the technology that Roger pioneered. And more importantly, probably I guarantee there's no one on this podcast who hasn't eaten a piece of jerky that came out of one of his jerky plants in a bag that Roger has sold jerky all across the earth under thousands of different brands and bags as a white label project. So I have no doubt there isn't a human being in the United States of America who hasn't eaten his product. I have no doubt in my mind on that. But Roger, you've had some experiences there, right? Like when you were pioneering that space as an entrepreneur, when you were actually going to create the first moist jerky ever. Like Zach and I like to go hunt in Mexico. In Mexico, they still make jerky the old-fashioned way. They hang it on a fence and they turn it into this dried out thing that you got to like pulp into a powder to even eat. That's how jerky was until the 1960s. How did you change that? And maybe share an experience or two around that.
Yeah, well, necessity is the mother of invention. I and my father had bought this old meatpacking plant. And we had borrowed money from the government and, to finance that and make it happen. Sincere trouble. I mean, we were not making the grade. And so you start to worry about how you're going to pay the bills. Well, I had made jerky all the way through college as kind of as a hobby. Because I'm a hunter like you. I go out and shoot a deer, I'd make jerky, Mark and I literally lived on that for numbers of years in our lives, Well, so how does this happen? It's necessity. When you are under the pressure, your mind works extra hard. And you get on your knees and you pray to your Heavenly Father and say, Heavenly Father, I need help. Please help me. Okay? That's where that came from, Josh. I started to make a little bit of this wet beef jerky, okay? And I put it on the market. It would mold in 2 weeks. So I had to figure out a way to keep it from molding. I cryovac gas flushed before there was ever such a machine invented on earth to accomplish that. Nobody could do what I did because they didn't have my education. Knowledge will save you. Okay, I'll tell you another story. First time I ever took this jerky to a trade show, Atlanta, Georgia, chipper show, a potato chip show. Well, anybody that distributes potato chips usually has jerky on their truck. Roger Tater, my first salesman, and I took 2 bridles, 2 saddles. We both had beards, cowboy hats, and our cowboy boots, so we went to Atlanta, okay? When we got there, we went down to a pet store and bought 2 bales of straw. We had a booth that was probably 8 feet wide, 10 feet wide. I don't even remember how wide it was. We set those 2 bales of straw down there, put the saddles on it and the bridles, and we brought a lot of samples. About 4 booths down was Lowry's beef jerky, the #1 beef jerky, the most highly sellable beef jerky in the world today. When people come by and sampled our product, it blew their mind. We had so many people in front of our booth, you could hardly get down the alley to get to Tom Lowry's beef jerky, okay? They never tasted it, and they were going nuts over it. Well, I was walking down that alley, or that, whatever you call it, between the booths. Tom Lowry was a pretty tall man. He came up, and I was, 29, 30 years old then. He put his arm around me. He says, Roger, I can't believe the traffic you're getting at your booth. I says, isn't it wonderful? He said, yeah. And you know what he said to me? He says, Roger, I'm sure glad I'm not in the same business you are.
He didn't even know.
And you know what my thought? And you know what my thought was? You stupid old man. I am going to whip your butt. Is Tom Lowry around today? Is Lowry's beef jerky around today?
Nope.
He was not willing to change. An entrepreneur has to be willing to change if he's going to be successful. And that's a real key. We know that. We've ate it, we've drank it. And in our businesses today, one of the biggest decisions we make is change. An entrepreneur, if you're not willing to change, you will fail sooner or later. Tom Lowry was not willing to change, and he died.
Wow. Zach, some lessons that you learned from that, right? That you take away from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, one is that change always happens, right? Regardless. And so, I know for us in our businesses, we're always looking at what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And, there's other companies that pop up and I mean, at some level you're competing with somebody, right? And Tom didn't think he had any competitors, and because he wasn't willing to take a look at it and recognize the fact that this young whippersnapper was coming after him, well, he wasn't willing to change and go innovate, right? And so I think as an entrepreneur as well, like you're saying, Roger, I mean, in all of our businesses, we've had to change things, and sometimes change is really hard, and it scares the crap out of people, right? They think, oh, they're going out of business or they're making these changes, so something must, it's like sometimes you're not making changes because things are affecting you right now. You're looking into the future and going, this is where the world is going. And if we want to be relevant and if we want to stay in business forever, like there's new advancements coming, there's new technologies coming. And if you're not willing to do the hard things and make those changes, sometimes you're dead already. You don't know it, right? And some people have a really hard time with that.
Zach, it's called fear.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
You are describing fear in absolute simple terms.
Yeah.
Fear.
And people don't know how to deal with it.
Cannot fear. It's not in them to fear. You don't fear. I know you. I know this guy. You don't fear. Period. It's not part of you.
Well, some of the takeaways I'm taking away today are just reminding me that dreams in business or in life, right? One of the things an entrepreneur is really good at is looking at a problem or looking at an opportunity and seeing the final good, seeing what can be, right? That's the dream process. And what I'm taking away here is that you better share that with like-minded people. If you share it with the wrong people, that's when it can be crushed. That's when it can be dashed into 1,000 pieces because of other people's fear. And you better be really careful who you share it with. And when you do share it, you better get to working on it. If you're going to do something, you better get after it. You better take the leap of faith. You better start. You better do it. And if you don't, right, somebody else will. And boy, I love the experiences you've shared today, Roger. I know our listeners have loved them. Don't worry, the listeners will have plenty more opportunities to hear experiences from Roger on the podcast, because there's just endless opportunities and lessons that can be learned. And so I'm going to give each of you a closing minute to 2 minutes to share any closing principles or thoughts that you think that the listener should really pull out of the experiences that were shared today. We'll start with Roger, then Zach, and we'll close up.
Number one is you got to work on your fear.
Great.
Analyze yourself. Know your abilities and your talents. Use them. Hire around you those things that you do not specialize or like doing. Period. Okay? Anything that goes uphill, you've got to be ready and willing to push, because it will not go there unless you push it. And if it's your idea and your thought and your money, you better push, because if you don't, it will not happen. An entrepreneur, and there's all kinds of entrepreneurs. I'd like to get into that with you sometime, okay? But a true entrepreneur will push. They will dream, and they will gamble. They will gamble it all. Over and over and over again, and that scares everyone in your life. You've got to be able to handle that and manage it in some way, because otherwise the world out there will kill you. Period.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Words of wisdom and complete knowledge. So, Zach.
Yeah, and I think, to go along with that and some of the things we've talked about, I think you have to work harder on yourself than you have to work on your business. Roger mentioned hire people around you. And I think, I've experienced this in my life where, you start something and then it gets to a certain point and then you kill it, right? Like as an entrepreneur, it's beyond you now. Like you're the visionary, you're the dreamer, but you don't have the skill sets to manage the daily operations, or you don't have the skill sets to make that business go to the next level. And you have to hire people around you to help you do that, because you can't be everything to everyone, right? Everybody has their own skills and talents. So you have to identify what your strengths are, what things you're not, strong at, and then identify, are you willing to do the work to get stronger, or do you need to hire somebody around you to do that? So work on yourself more than your business. Identify really mentally where those weak spots are. This whole fear, right? If you work more on managing your fear than you do on your business, you're probably going to have a successful business, because other people will help you do those other things that you're not good at, but you have to help keep the fear out of the organization. I'll give you a quick, and take the emotion out of it, right? You need to work with facts and data, and you need to be careful to pull the emotion out. I just, real quick, I'll give you an example. We're in election cycle or election year right now. And so I'm watching all these candidates, and I just saw something yesterday come across about one of the presidential candidates, Bobby Kennedy. And underneath the thread, somebody said he doesn't have a chance in the world. The guy's wishy-washy. He can't make a decision, and they posted a video of him making a statement 4 weeks previous to this post. And they said, just 4 weeks ago, here's what he said. And now he's flip-flopped. He said this. And I went and watched the original clip, and what he said was, here's what I think right now, but I don't have enough information to really make an educated decision on it, right? Here's a critical thinker. And then 4 weeks later, he says, I've learned more, I've gained more information, here's what I think. And somebody out there is going, well, this guy's wishy-washy, he's a flip-flopper, right? He just changed. Well, that's pure emotion. But what did he really do? His knowledge, right? He went and he got more knowledge, and now he can make different and better decisions. And so I think, we have to be willing to do that and not be locked into a position in our business or our model or an idea or philosophy that we have. As we move along in business, we need to be willing to get more information, and we need to be willing to take the emotion out of it and say, look, here's what I used to believe, but the information I'm getting now is different, and I've got to make a change, right? And then be willing to do the hard thing to make the change. So, managing that fear, work on your business, or work on yourself more than your business, and be willing to make changes, I think, are huge key things.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother. Yes.
Well, I'll close with this. The principles shared here today, I would say, if you'll go back and listen to them, if you'll make some of what Roger shared today, statements that you can recall in your mind in a moment of trial, it may make all the difference for you. Roger, I'm beyond grateful. Everything you shared today are things that you've shared with me now for 17 or so years. And in really hard business times, in one in particular, I was going through a really challenging business experience where I thought I was really going to lose everything. As entrepreneurs, you go to those places. You go to the bottom of the ocean of challenge and struggle, where not only your life and your livelihood's on line, but maybe hundreds of other people that you employ are there with you. And I was in one of those places. And the thought that you shared today came to my mind clear as day. It was brought to me, and it was, knowledge will save you. You had shared with me that statement just like you did today hundreds of times before. And in that moment, I realized I couldn't get out of that problem without gaining more knowledge. And I was able to go find the right people who had the knowledge. And that knowledge did save me and hundreds of other employees. Yep. And so these statements and these ideas that you shared today, if people will put them into practice, they're not just words. These are words with thousands and tens of thousands of hours of tribulation behind them in business. And so I just want to say thank you. You've been an entrepreneur who's always been willing to share with the next generation of an entrepreneur your experiences. And it has made all the difference for me. And I hope and I pray that it makes all the difference for listeners today who may be winning or may be struggling, but anywhere in between, that some of these principles and ideas can make a difference for them today. And thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning here at the Sound Money, Sound Principles podcast. And we look forward to the opportunity to get together again and do it again and share some other opportunities with people and other stories and thoughts. And so I want to say thanks, Roger, for making the time today. And thanks for all the listeners taking the opportunity to learn. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Sound Money, Sound Principles podcast. So everybody have a great week.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. It's been fun. We'll see you next time.
I agree. Thank you.
All right. See you later.